In part one, I spent a lot of time talking about the Zollmauer, the custom wall. This diagram shows an earlier wall with a stated defensive purpose. Whether it was actually capable of withstanding an assault is possibly subject to debate, given the state of artillery by this time. The wall dates specifically from the middle of the 19th century, but some various fortifications had existed in Berlin from the 13th century. This particular wall is in fact a slight extension and upgrading of a pre-existing wall. To align yourself with the present-day city, you can see the Spreeinsel, although that itself is split into two islands, with a bridge indicated from the Lustgarten leading to what is today the Museumsinsel, i.e. the Museum Island. To the left, the plan shows later developments. You can just about see the Unter den Linden, which is outside the wall, but also abutting it. This shows more detail in some respects, but loses it in some other respects. It shows Berlin on the right-hand side of the Spree and Köln occupying the Spreeinsel. The immediately previous fortifications enclosing the twin city of Berlin-Köln had used the Spree Canal, i.e. the western arm of the Spree, as the boundary. This wall extends further west to encompass Friedrichswerder. Note there is nothing shown to the west of the wall in this plan, which is earlier than the previous one. At the top you have the Spandauer Vorstadt, just outside the wall. In Köln you can see the palace with the Marstall, i.e. the stables, below it. And incidentally, Neukölln, shown on the bottom, is different from today's Neukölln. Again, this view shows more detail in places with the loss in other places. You can clearly see the Spreeinsel and the moat surrounding the wall itself. In the west, the new town of Dorotheenstadt is also shown, with Unter den Linden at its southern end, with many dots indicating all the trees. If you're able to get this picture large enough to read the legend, it does indicate what many of these buildings are. This is intended to show the new gate arrangement with respect to the arrangement on the older wall. In the eastern Berlin section, the gates have just been moved out only very slightly, whereas in the west they've been moved out a fair distance. The Getraudentor is shown to be on the Spree Canal, the western limit of the original walls. There's a bit of a technicality with respect to the Neues Tor. Some sources say it was a completely new gate, whereas this plan implies that it was nevertheless moved slightly from an original position. This particular gate is just to the west of the palace and led out onto Unter den Linden. This places the gates with respect to the present-day city. Number 1, the Spandauer Gate, has been replaced by Hackisches Markt, and it leads away to Oranienburgstrasse in the Spandauer Vorstadt. Number 2, the Georgentor, led away to Georgenplatz, nowadays known as Alexanderplatz. Number 5, Getraudentor, was on the older wall, and as I said in a previous slide, was replaced by Leipziger Tor. Leipziger Tor led away to Leipziger Straße. However, Leipziger Platz at the other end of the street was named after the battle. It might have been a deliberate intention to have the two adjoining, for all I know. I don't know. And number 6, the Neues Tor, was to the west of the Zeughaus and at the eastern end of Unter den Linden. Although we don't have any visible remnants from this particular wall that I've just been talking about, here is a remnant from an even earlier defensive wall, which is still standing on Littenstrasse. Now this is a map I showed you in part 1. It shows the customs wall, the Zollmauer, shown in red. And I stated then that you can see the remnants of the older defensive wall by virtue of the fact that although the walls were demolished about the same time that this new Zollmauer was built, the moat or the ditch was retained, which you can see here. You can see the river Spree enclosing the Spreeinsel but outside of that you can see the remnants of the moat. A section of this ditch or moat was used for the route of the Stadtbahn, specifically around Alexanderplatz. The Stadtbahn, shown in black on this diagram, is an elevated west-east railway originally connecting Charlottenburg with the Schlesischer Bahnhof. Nowadays the name tends to be loosely indicating the line between where it intersects with the Ringbahn, whose dog-head shape is shown in orange. And incidentally, the difficulty with various names often changing is illustrated quite well here. In part 1, Schlesischer Bahnhof was introduced as the Frankfurter Bahnhof, whereas nowadays it is Ostbahnhof, and worse still, you can see a different Ostbahnhof shown on the map. Borsa station, west of Alexanderplatz, is now Hackescher Markt. Until the Second World War, a large stock exchange building was situated close by. And this is it. This is a present-day map. The Stadtbahn cuts across the top of the Museumsinsel, directly alongside the Pergamon Museum, and after crossing the Spree, then follows the old moat from Hackescher Markt, curving into Alexanderplatz and beyond. Colonnades were built in places over the moat, and this is the only one still in its original place on Möhrenstrasse. You can see it has been incorporated into the adjacent buildings. This is the northern side of the road, number 36 to 37, which is used today by the Justice Ministry. This is also incidentally the location where on 9th of November 1989, Gunter Schabowski made a slightly erroneous message about travel permits to the west, which resulted in a deluge of people entering West Berlin. This is a more face-on view of what appears to be the southern side. This incidentally is just to the south of an area on the Linden, which I will also talk about soon. This colonnade was originally on the Spittelmarkt, but now stands on Marion Grafin Dönhoffplatz, or Dönhoffplatz for short. As shown here, this colonnade is in Kleist Park on Potsdamer Straße in Schönberg, but originally lay at the eastern end of Königstraße, which is now Rathaustraße, just where Königstraße entered Königsplatz, which is now Alexanderplatz, and also previously Georgenplatz, as I just mentioned. It became Königsplatz when the Kurfürst, or Elector of Brandenburg, was allowed to become a king within the Hohenzollern possession of Prussia. This was just after 1700. It became Alexanderplatz after the Russian Tsar during the Napoleonic period. And this is the same colonnade shown on a stamp of 1949. And this was when it was in its original location, with Alexanderplatz station also shown, the railway being guided by the course of the moat, as already explained. In the west, a section of the old ditch was used for a tram tunnel under the Linden, which I think is indicated on this map. The Prinzessenpalais was inside the old wall, but when that was demolished, they extended their garden and used the ditch as a water feature, although I believe there were problems with the smell, which I should think might have been a problem elsewhere as well. When the trams were electrified within a couple of years, around 1900, the Kaiser forbade an overhead wire to cross the Linden. Practically all roads by then were under the control of the council, but the Kaiser still had some rights over the Linden. South of the Linden, and not shown here, the tunnel split into a western and eastern section. But on a particular day in the 1920s, the trams stopped running throughout the entire city because of the economic crisis. And when they started running again, the western section of this tunnel never came back into use again. On this map, you can also see the Friedrich Wilhelm University, now named after Humboldt. And there's also various other buildings which still carry their same name. Note that the main road is now part of Unter-den Linden, but carries various other names on this map. Unter-den Linden was extended eastwards during the 1930s, and you can still see that nowadays where the original Unter-den Linden ceased, i.e. where the trees ended, along with the dual carriageway nature of the road. This is seen clearer on this particular map. And note also that what was formerly Opernplatz, adjacent to the Staatsoper, is now known as Babelplatz. And this is the tram tunnel seen from the south, with the Neue Wache to the right. I'm not sure whose statue that is, they have changed over the years. Although this ramp has disappeared, the tunnel is still there and causing some disruption. The number 100 bus, popular with tourists, used to be a double-decker, but that is currently not allowed because of this tunnel. Discussions are always ongoing as to what to do with the tunnel, but at the time of speaking, nothing definite has been announced. The long disused western section of the tram tunnel has been used for a memorial to the book burning on Opernplatz, Babelplatz, on the 10th of May 1933, just after the Nazis had come to power. This memorial looks underground to an empty library. Well, as always, thanks very much if you're still with me after this 12-minute talk. If I can just finish off by mentioning my book, as shown here, Berlin, an A to Z compilation. And thanks again for staying with me. Cheers for now.